Welcome to Collective Soulversations. I'm Jody Jones, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this amazing journey exploring spirituality, healing, and personal growth. With over 15 years of experience as a psychic medium and energy healer, I've made it my mission to help people connect with their true selves, and I can't wait to share this journey with you. In every episode, I chat with incredible guests who bring their own unique stories and insights to the table. We dive into different tools and practices that can help support you on your path of self discovery. So, whether you're just starting out or you've been in this journey for a while, Collective Soulversations is all about creating a friendly and welcoming space for us to explore the mysteries of the soul together. So, grab your favorite cup of tea, get comfy, and let's dive into this enlightening adventure together. Hey, everybody, welcome to Collective Soulversations. I am your host, Jody Jones, and we have a wonderful guest with us today. I have not had the pleasure of meeting him before. This is my first time, so I'm excited to unpack everything that he has to offer with you guys. So, let me introduce Blaise Kennedy. And so, Blaise is a spiritual teacher. His teachings are an integration of his own path and the experiences he has had from working with his students, where many spiritual teachings center around personal path and personal development. Blaise focuses on relationship, connection, and the impact of collective fields of consciousness. While Blaise teaches meditation and personal skills, he is most excited about the growing field of consciousness that is forming in his global community of students. So, welcome, Blaise. Welcome to our platform. How are you? Welcome.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Beautiful.
So
And so, I'm just learning you are a fellow Canadian. You are from British Columbia. Whereabouts in British Columbia are you?
I was born in Vancouver. I've lived in Nelson in the interior, halfway between Vancouver and Calgary along the border in a nice little mountain hippie town for the last 10 years or so.
Beautiful. So that would explain your like very calm and chilled vibe, right? You have all the grounding energy of the forest and nature around you.
Maybe that's what it is. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
certainly been a good place for my spiritual life and my process. It's been very good to me here.
Yeah, beautiful. So I'm meeting you for the first time. So I always like to know a little bit about the journey of how you are where you are. And just before I came on, Spirit, when I was tuning into your energy, because that's kind of what I do, Spirit said to me, "Healer, heal thyself." So I feel like that must have something to do with how you have come to where you are. So take us back in time. Let us know who Blaise is, how you came to be a teacher, a guide, a guru. Let us know.
Oh, yeah. Um, Gosh, that's a long story.
That's what we're here for. So go in and share some of the, the stuff
I
that
think
shines high for you.
where I would start is I when I was a child, I it's like when you have a dream and you never remember when the dream starts, you just find
Right.
yourself in a dream.
Hmm.
I What I experienced when I was a child is I was just kind of there. I had no connection to the past, just sort of what was right in front of me was what was available. And so I lived in a very normal Western world. I had no real concept of spirituality. I didn't think much about consciousness. I liked playing hockey and I liked hanging out with my friends and all these things. And most people I knew seemed to be quite well adjusted. They did pretty well in the world, in that sort of what's right in front of us world that was presented to us. And I really struggled. I think I always struggled. I struggled to do my best. I struggled to be disciplined. I struggled to be honest. I struggled to be focused. I just was not really able to do my best. And I kind of built up over time this reputation that there was something wrong with me or that I wasn't doing my best. I had a parent die when I was 12. My father died. And this really just intensified that. My life, as you become a teenager, you're supposed to grow up and become more mature and more responsible and make decisions and navigate the world in a healthy way. And I was really delayed. I wasn't able to do any of those things. I graduated high school, but kind of barely, and had no real direction after school. I used drugs a lot. I really struggled with motivation and direction. It never occurred to me that I could heal or make a systemic change or that I could do something really different. One time I tried as a teenager going to a counselor, and I'll never forget. I told the counselor, whatever it is was that I had to say, and in our 1 hour meeting, and at the end he said something like, Blaise, you're really smart. You sounds like you really know what's going on for you. I don't know that there's much I can do to help you.
Mm.
And I remember thinking on one hand, like, wow, look at
I'm
me.
such a mess. Yeah, like nobody can help me.
Well, it was a bit of both. I thought like, oh, I'm so clever. I was always told that I was intelligent, but also like, that's it. Like, that's what's down this road.
Right.
If you go in this store, that's what you get. And I just didn't push on it again. I just never considered it. And, quietly, I had a developing drug problem. It was just getting worse. It was the place where I felt alive. It was the place where I had, joyful experiences. And I kind of painted myself in a corner. The older I got, I didn't get to have all the positive experiences you get when you grow up, like, I don't know, accomplishing things or having, romance that really drives you or traveling. And my world just kind of got smaller and darker. And when I was 24, I got sent to a treatment center for addiction. And at the time, I sort of thought, like, well, I've kind of wasted my whole life. I have nothing to show for the last 24 years of my life. You know how it is when you're 24, you think that no concept of the passage of time really and what it
Right.
is to be an
And did
adult.
you go there voluntarily? Because you got sent there. Did somebody make you go there, or was it
I got in trouble.
okay?
It's very easy to get in trouble when you are irresponsible and have a drug problem.
Oh yeah.
And I got in trouble, and my mom offered me a way out. She said, "You can go to treatment." And right about this time, I had a friend, sort of consequently or parallel to this. I had a friend that I would hang out with a lot, sort of at the end of my period of addiction, and he was really into the Kabbalah, and he had spiritual books on his bookshelf. And I don't know how much he actually knew about it, but he kind of introduced, oh, there's this thing called spirituality or mysticism, and it's profound. And I remember thinking like, drugs are a dead end. This is not going anywhere. It's not developmental. It's regressive. You get worse over time. I guess I'm just going to get into spirituality. I mean, I guess that's really all that's left.
Wow.
And I didn't have a lot of focus or ability to actualize that. It was being a drug addict is a bit like being in a kind of haze, right?
Right. Right.
But when I went to treatment, when my mom offered it to me, I was like, okay, yes, I can make sense of this. I'm going to do this thing called spirituality, whatever that is. And it, when I went there, um, what I discovered quite rapidly was that it was fascinating.
Hmm.
There were people from all over the world, especially all over Canada. People, it's expensive to go to treatment. It costs a lot of money, at least the
Right.
treatment center I went to. So people there run businesses, they have families, they have all these, big lives. They often have accomplished a lot.
Hmm.
And so I get in this door with this tremendous mix of people. And suddenly I feel like, oh, well, you know what? Actually, I haven't wasted my whole life. I'm at the very beginning of a journey. Like, this is the beginning of my life, not the end.
Right.
And whereas all these other people wanted to get back to their lives and were really excited about it, I didn't have a life to get back to. And I found that I actually enjoyed being in treatment. I mean, it was uncomfortable and difficult, but it was fascinating. I tried being in college, I tried being in university, studying in a traditional sort of rational way, or writing essays or the things you do in college. And I
Hmm.
just didn't, I it wasn't really that interesting to me. And then I discovered, sitting in group therapy and contemplating life and the life that you've lived and how, you hold emotion from the past or how you hold on to the past experiences. I was fascinated. I actually thought I found it. Like this is what I'm going to do. I'm not
Right.
going to be a professional hockey player. I'm not going to be an author. I'm not going to be a scientist. None of those things are what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this thing that really started in treatment. And I realized you can't lose at it, right? Like the
Right.
personal work or spirituality in general is just about being with whatever's happening with you. You can't disqualify yourself as long as you can be honest, as
Right.
long as you're willing to see, you win. It's not competitive in the way
Right.
that many of the other fields in our world are.
Yes,
Because I
for
felt
sure.
very empowered. I felt like I can do this. I felt deeply empowered, and that was the start of it. That was when I was 24. I was
And that it was
14.
interesting because I in the bio that was in 2010 for you, right? Was
Yeah,
that when that
yeah,
happened?
10. That's right.
So it was a very interesting time on the planet then. There was actually like a massive portal, an energy portal that opened up where many of us started our awakening around that time. I know I did. It was very similar, but I mean not in the same way, but it was like you had this opportunity of like go this way or go that way and you had to make a decision, right?
Yeah, I I think there was really only one door that was open, but
Right?
absolutely, this was the
Right.
only thing that I had going on,
Right.
and
Well, there's
I
always
happened to
two, and
love it.
I feel the same way. I mean, we feel like that other door we would not choose it, but
Yeah.
some people do. Some souls, right? They do choose to continue down that same, but obviously, your soul led you in a different way for sure.
I think that the even developmentally, I mean, I consider myself to be developmentally delayed as an adult. But when you get to about to be about the age of 24, science would tell you, or neuroscience would tell you, it's the beginning of your ability to have metacognition. Like it's the beginning of the ability to sort of think about your life in as a path or as a to have a big strategy for life.
Mm,
And for me, it really aligned with the beginning of my ability, my experiential ability to really consider like, what is my life strategy? Not just to like pick what school I want to go to or the thing that I want to do, but I developed the ability to consider my life strategy. And that again was so empowering. My wife said something very similar. Like she realized at some point she could contemplate how to learn, not just try to learn something, but contemplate the learning strategy. And yeah, this allowed me to make this good decision, right? When you could see the bigger picture, you go, oh, well, clearly this is the this is the
right.
decision to make.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then obviously there was a part of you that was ignited, right? Like had this like, oh, I didn't even know this side of me existed.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that that kind of like awakening happened for you while you were amongst a community of other souls who were also, you know, and, and maybe you were like a few steps ahead of them, which was interesting because if you would have like been talking about yourself and where you are developmentally, you would think that you thought you'd convince yourself that you were behind everybody. But in
Oh, it was
actuality, you were like, you were already
it's
coming through
super
some stuff.
it's super useful. It's extremely useful to be in a room with a bunch of other people who are where you are, figuring it out the way you are, that are
Yeah.
being supported to do so. The
Right.
setup of it is amazing
Right.
for so many reasons, but absolutely, it'd be like, oh, actually, all of the horrible, bizarre, strange, dysfunctional things you've done, like we've all done that. And like,
Right.
what are we going to do about it?
Right.
Really levels the playing field because most people who struggle from addiction are so different from the people around them in their
Right.
family that it's
Yes.
it's hard to relate. And suddenly you
Right.
get in a room full of people, everyone has done some version of that.
Hmm.
Like we're all on equal footing. Like, what are we going to
Yes.
do about it?
Right.
It's
Yes.
treatment's built out of AA or it's offshoot of AA. It's evolved a lot since then, but this is the basic premise. It's been
Yeah.
extremely powerful within our culture. It formed the first kind of 2 years of my spiritual journey, but it changed pretty radically after that. One other thing that I would say is like I tell the story that I've told as if I'm like bumbling, like I just find myself here and I don't know where I'm going. And my journey has really broadened my perspective on my life. And if you ask me today, I would say it was just a matter of time and
Right.
before I walked through the store.
Right.
There was no way that anything else other than a radical transformation of consciousness was possible. I just didn't know it. I had
Right.
no evidence for that. So I was quite naive. And all that I knew was that I didn't have any fear about awakening or transformation or healing. I never wondered, is this going to happen to me? It just felt like, of course I'm going to do this. Like I was very confident. It was the thing that I was most confident ever about in my entire life. It
Well,
felt like really easy to, start to do the work. Um,
yeah, it's beautiful. And then so you go to the treatment center, you have obviously the beginning of the awakening, you start to have the awareness of more potential. So then what happens when you leave there? Because then you're
yeah.
back to,
Well,
reality.
sort of. I mean, some people go back to reality. They like to keep people close to the nest if they can. I lived in a sober living house like 100 yards away. I did aftercare, like they do it in stages. They're quite sophisticated in how they allow people to transition towards having a life. Like when you first get there, you can't go for a walk, right? Like you can't do anything. So then I did 5 months, or I did 2 months of that. I did 3 months of living in a house in the neighborhood and being at the treatment center every day. And then I did another year and a half living in another house in the neighborhood with other people who'd graduated. Um, and they ask you to make agreements, like you're going to go to a certain number of meetings and you're going to follow aftercare, and all of that was fine. By that point, as I'm starting to transition, I go, okay, I don't want to do this recovery thing forever.
Hmm.
This isn't my thing, but I'm going to do it thoroughly for the year and a half or whatever it is that I've sort of agreed to in total. And I did
Right.
it very thoroughly. And at this time, I started to become divergent from what everyone else was doing. Uh, I, I, two main things that I did that were divergent. One is I got really interested in meditation. I taught myself to meditate, and I was thrilled that I just did it every day. I actually picked up the book A Course in Miracles, which had a 1 year meditation program. I couldn't tell you a single word that was in that book, but I read the activity every day, and I sat every day, and I was just so happy I was doing it. I was like, this is
Right.
the greatest thing ever, that I have discipline, that I can follow through, that it's not hard, that I'm motivated. That in of itself was the kind of prize for me. And I also became a raw food vegan, which I'm sure everyone around me thought was really weird. It was kind of weird. Um,
And what made you do that? What
I
just
got it's funny. I knew somebody who did it. I got a book. My friend got me a book by Gabriel Cousins. And just, it's funny to think about this. And Gabriel Cousins is a very awake being who promoted this diet. In his book, he talked about like a really radical experience of life. He talked about the kind of levels of consciousness. He talked about the purification of the body. He talked about energy and light and all of these things that I thought, wow, like that's amazing. See, I had just come from a world where drugs were the most interesting thing in my life, and I was going to AA meetings where people were like trying to pick up the pieces of their life, and I was like, so how do I get to the place where life is extremely exciting? Like
right, right,
how do I get there? So I read this book and I'm like, well, this sounds incredible. Like I don't understand anything he's talking about. Like what
right.
is that the body is, made of light. No idea what that means, but like, okay, I'll do what this guy says. And I think if it had any, I really failed at being a raw food vegan. I think as most people do. If you don't know, it just means you're eating uncooked fruits and vegetables and nuts and coconut oil.
Hmm.
I lost a lot of weight, but if it did anything for me, it definitely uh, purified me physically after years of not taking care of my body. So
Right, because it's
I
a
was doing
huge
these,
detox, right?
it was
It's
a
it's
huge
it's
detox.
it's a 24/7 detox when you're
Yeah.
doing it.
It's
Yes.
basically like a long, slow fast.
Right. Yes.
And I
Which is
didn't
which is
know.
hard on the nervous system, which is interesting that so And I wonder if this is just because of the male energy, because I'll hear this with male clients as well, where it's like you can do like like I could never do that because especially and if I had addiction issues and then I decided I was going to do that, that's such a jar to the nervous system. Like
Yes.
it takes you right out of your comfort zone. Like you're raw, you're eating raw, but you become raw yourself, right?
I wouldn't necessarily advise it. I just did the best that I could, and I was just trying to chart a radical path. I
Right.
was so happy that I had the discipline and motivation to do it. I
Mm-hmm.
was happy that no one was telling me to do it.
Right.
And as weird as it was, nobody really pressed me about it because I think they just believed I was trying my best. Trying my best.
Right.
There's always an overlap between addictive patterns of behavior and addiction that they're looking out for, but they let me do it. I eventually kind of gave up raw veganism and became a vegan, and now I'm not a vegan at all. But I went through these sort of this is the beginning of spiritual practice and intentional
Right.
living. That's really the essence of what I'm saying. And the more that I was in AA and NA, like I love the program and what it offers for people, but I just was kind of waiting for the next, like, what's my path? I read a couple books by Krishnamurti, which really resonated with me, but I wasn't looking for a teacher. I wasn't looking for any method. I wasn't looking for a technique. I just really sat with myself. And then moved back to Vancouver, and I met this woman who was a channel. It's funny, I haven't told these stories in a long time. I met this woman who was a channel, and it was just so out there. I don't mean as in like unreal, but not like anything I'd ever experienced before.
Mm.
Uh, Watching someone have access to a tremendous amount of information, the ability to express that in a way that felt otherworldly.
Right.
And this woman and channel said, "You're going to meet a woman, you're going to have kids, you're going to get married. That's going to be your path." And I was like, Okay, sure."
Right.
Like,
Sounds okay.
I would look for any pointers I can get on like where I'm
Right.
supposed to be going. I'll take it.
Right.
And on you're talking about dates on December 21st, 2012, I moved back to Vancouver. I'm basically doing nothing but meditating and hanging out and making my salads or whatever I was eating at the time. And this channel invited me to uh, a, a dance, ecstatic dance, which was not something I'd ever seen before. I remember going into this church and it's dark and it's just people in black leotards dancing in particularly unconventional ways, and I thought like, wow, this is what a what a unique experience,
Right.
anything like this. And it's halfway through the dance I met my wife there. So my wife had the channel, the woman was there, and my wife reports that there was this strange lady staring at her the other time.
Mm.
And when I met my wife, I've never had an experience like this. I've had, since then, all the fancy spiritual experience I could think of, but I never had this experience. When I saw her, the only way I could describe it was like an arranged marriage by God. That's what I told.
Right.
It's like you
Right.
see a person and you're like, this somehow, you just
Mm-hmm.
get the experience. This is the person that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with.
Right.
It's not because you're attracted to them or because you weigh the pros and cons of being in a relationship with them. It's
Right.
just the way it is.
Yeah. It's soul memory.
It's a profound system of guidance
Right.
that, again, for me, I was like, this is great. Like, I might not understand this, but this is really clear messaging. I'm getting a really clear messaging on what I'm supposed to do. So
Right.
I just, talked to her, and she had the same sort of experience and was like, okay, so now that we're together, like, who are you and what are we doing here?
Right.
And we figured it out. But she introduced me to two spiritual teachers. I hadn't had any. Um, I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't tried to. She introduced me to two teachers, Adyashanti, who's a California-based Zen non-dual teacher, and a man named Thomas Hubel, who teaches a lot about trauma and healing and relationship. And again, I met my wife, and it was like the curriculum of my life was just assigned to me. Here's the person. Here's the teachers. She was the one that actually decided we're going to go to Nelson. Like my whole life was just given to me. And I was so
Right.
grateful. Like this is, I got a package. I don't have to make decisions. I don't have to figure out
Right.
what it is that I'm doing. This is it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll pause, but that's really when the spiritual journey began. I feel like everything that I've talked about before was like kind of getting ready for it. I didn't know
Yeah.
that, but it was getting ready for awakening.
Yeah, that's so and so was there any time, obviously, once you met your wife and that momentum began to build, with with the soul plan and the trajectory with that, but prior to that, was there any, like, relapse or fallback? Like, were you able just to be from the drugs, like, gone, done, like it's completely, or was there a moment where it was like, I might fall back into that? Did that come
No, I
into it?
never, I never, I never considered it.
Beautiful.
No.
It's great. I'm always inspired because this does happen. There are souls that do, and I feel like they get the golden ticket. I call it the golden ticket because it really just feels like their path is very, very straight, which is wonderful. It doesn't happen for all of us, but it's interesting because I feel like there's it's almost like a catch up to do. It's almost like, you come into this incarnation, you have like all of this baggage, this energetic baggage with you. And then it's like you remove that baggage, it gets removed, and then boom, you're on the path, which is very exciting because to me, that shows that one of your purposes is to be of service to others, to come in and be able to, get through that stuff and show others that it's doable. Like it's totally doable.
Looking back, the worst part of my life was not having a direction.
Right.
Meaningless existence without purpose, by far the worst time of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that because
Right.
I was whatever seeking pleasure and avoiding pain and all the
Yeah.
things that I do. But
Yeah.
by far, that's the worst time of my life. I definitely feel experienced it as a golden ticket, like um, very gifted in that regard. And I would differentiate. That's very different from saying it's been comfortable or easy.
Right.
Really, really stress that. It doesn't mean that it's less painful. In fact, it's been very, very uncomfortable and painful. But it doesn't, that's not what really matters. And for me,
But it's good for people to know because I feel like, especially in this day and age, with the technology that we have, with the social media presence that we have, that people who, answer their calling, and I feel like it's a calling, it's not, you don't just say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to stand up before everybody and try and be a guide for people. And,
yeah.
it's a big responsibility. But I feel like there's this sense of when we step into these callings of now I've got to be perfect. Now I can't let anybody know when I'm having a bad day. My followers can't know when I'm, going through the real human stuff. But that's important. It's so important that we don't make it look so easy, right? Like that's the
So one of the other gifts of my life as you speak this is like I speak about things that are really fancy and beautiful now all the time. And it has a kind of cachet or a look. You use the word guru to start. I would never talk about myself as being a guru, but it's fancy and it can appear to be a certain way.
Mhm.
And it's a huge blessing in my life that I have a very blue collar, in the trenches story. I find it very grounding. Uh,
Right.
from the time that I was in treatment on, like the basic message is you need to really pay attention and give your focus to the place where there's pain and dysfunction. That's your
Mhm.
work. And
Right.
and I've done really well. It's been kind of natural for me to take on that ethic and continue to. It's really served me well, and it served me well as a teacher because that's what most people are. That's what everybody, that's what people are really dealing with and where they need to be met, where they need support, where they need to be encouraged is actually the pain or difficulty in your life. That is your path. It's not somehow in the way of you being a better person tomorrow. it's the way that you get to your tomorrow.
Right.
And, in spirituality, there's such a broad um, point of focus on what's really important. I definitely think it's very, very important that we pay attention to the pain and shadow and dysfunction in ourselves and in our world. So it's been a gift. It's been a gift that I had a challenging start, and it's been a gift that I had such momentum and such clarity about what I was supposed to be doing. The
Yeah.
last 14 years of my life have been uh, at times excruciatingly painful, but never once have I really questioned if I'm doing the right thing or going in the right direction
Right.
fundamentally.
And I feel like that's important for our listeners to understand is that, when you're going through a spiritual journey, a spiritual ascension, a spiritual awakening, all these, titles that we give it, we're not meant to bypass it. We're not meant to be, shown how to go around it because the real growth that we come here for is through it, right? Like it's through it. And I feel like, people like yourself and myself and others, we, part of our experience of the calling is that we go through this stuff to show others, yeah, you can walk through the fire and still be at, still come out of the fire. So don't be afraid of that, right? I feel like that's a big part of what we need to share or help others with. So you talk about, the sense of community, the sense of building community right now. What do you feel is like, and everybody has their own like kind of like little niche or their little, this is kind of my area. What do you feel like is right now the circle of souls that you're working with, what their struggles are the most of right now?
Uh, I love the transition that you've made. And so I will answer your question, but first you said, our job is to show that um, going through things is the way, something like that. And bypassing is not. And I take a historical lens on this, and I'd say, from my perspective, going through things historically has been much harder, and there's been lots of reasons to try and bypass things in the past. And I can maybe speak more to this. This is the best time ever to go through stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The technology, the resources, the state of consciousness now is so available to healing and transformation. And so I really think that this is an evolving reality, is that things that used to be particularly difficult, and I'll name some of those, are getting much easier. For example, like in my family, my father died when I was 12. My uncle died, committed suicide, and an aunt that committed suicide. I have a generation in my family that lived in severe pain and trauma.
Right.
There was no technology to support them. There was no understanding of attachment theory or what they went through as children or how the nervous system holds this or how they can use sort of the resources of the world and connection as a way to resolve the trauma that they had experienced.
Mm-hmm.
They grew up Catholic, and there are sort of tools you could call them within Catholicism, but none that touched or really helped resolve those problems. So the world has been in a place where understanding trauma has not really been possible. And um, even the word trauma really take, doesn't have attraction in our civilization until very, very recently. I mean,
Right.
progress increasingly so.
Yeah.
So people didn't even know what their challenges were. Like if I analyze what people are doing spiritually over the last 50 years, is really like fumbling around with their beliefs and their thoughts and attachment, identification, with not really understanding actually, how do I come to be holding the past? Why do I have all this stuff that I have to work through, and how do I actually do that? We're rapidly growing in our capacity to do that. So
Right.
another one of the gifts of my difficulty is through direct personal experience, I have learned a lot about trauma. And you don't learn about trauma necessarily by being traumatized. Like when my father dies, that doesn't make me wise. What makes you wise is when you work through trauma,
Right.
when you complete experiences. That is how everyone can be wise and grow through the experiences they have and learn both to have a tremendous capacity for, or I should say, compassion for life, but even more broadly, be able to recognize what's happening in our world. Like when there is dysfunction or pain or addiction, when there's war between cultures, when there's, social issues that are coming up, you can say, oh, actually, I see what's happening here. I can relate to this now. It's sort of, it's trauma. So through personal experience, I learned a lot about trauma, and I again loved the process of resolving it. Thomas Hubel again really advocates for this, and he opened up a worldview in which the technology to resolve trauma was, at the time, blew my mind. It was so sophisticated. So today, when I started teaching, I really I had a desire to teach a lot of stuff. I wanted to teach the whole thing. I didn't want to have a niche. I wanted to teach the broadest and most integrated spectrum of consciousness. I wanted to do everything from healing, manifestation, awakening as a progressive path towards liberation, collective consciousness, but I didn't know very much. I didn't know how to teach. So where I started was I would teach a lot about awareness, which is awareness-based teaching, which is kind of like a door to meditation. It's just one way to look at consciousness and meditation. And I taught about trauma. And the people that originally came to me, well, they came to me either because they knew about awareness or they knew about trauma or they knew about some combination of the two. And when people came to me, then I got to work with them. And I started this about 4 years ago. This is about 10 years into a sort of very radical transformational process, which I haven't really spoken much about, but that's okay. And the people that came to me were really interested in these two things. And by working with them, my my understanding of reality has expanded so much because I get to sit here and look at people and be with them. I get to learn by being with others. This is my
Right.
job, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm helping and healing, whatever. I'm part of people's awakening and healing, but I'm studying them. Like that's what I do is I'm present with them. I feel their world. I feel what life has been like with them. I feel their consciousness, and my understanding of reality has progressed continuously. So when you have a group of people, you have to start somewhere. So you start with some basic skills, and just as Thomas Hummel did or does, I was really focused on not just helping people myself, but again, creating a group of people, a community of people who are really trauma literate and available to each other. And the basics of this are that our nervous systems, if you want to call it that, or the fifth dimension, is an interrelated field of energy. This is the basics of it. This is what's emerging when we discover about trauma, as I described earlier, or where I think is the really opening up for in consciousness is the fifth dimension or this field of energy that we all share. So to resolve trauma isn't just like I am with myself. That's part of it, but is the understanding that my all my thoughts, all my feelings, all my sensations, everything that I'm working through is designed to be part of life. This field of energy is interrelationship, it's connection. It's like the internet, and all of our nervous systems are designed to be plugged into that. So previously, you may resolve trauma by, if you watch the Osho documentary, by breathing hard or punching a pillow or doing all kinds of yogic exercises to try to purge energy of your body.
Mm-hmm.
In the modern context, in somatic therapy or in interpersonal work, relational work, you just share your feelings with people. You share your experience with people, and it moves literally from your body out into the space around you where we all are. You
Mm-hmm.
learn that the things that you're trying to work through, most of them, or all of them really, just need to be shared with people. They just need to be felt together
Right.
in
Right.
this field of energy that we all share. And so the access to this internet, this fifth dimension, this field of energy is increasingly available to people. So when I started, I had people who were really interested in learning how to do this. And so I started to develop practices. We developed practices together in a framework. So not just I help people, but that we all develop capacity together. And then the community grows and learns and supports together. So people that work with me often will be part of groups that develop this skill set. And again, it's not just that I'm helping them, but that we develop the skill set together that they apply with their partners and with their children and their neighbors, and but most specifically in practice with the people in the group. So
Hmm.
that's what I've been doing primarily for the last 4 years. I keep being like, I should talk about the traditional spiritual path and the levels of consciousness and the potential of liberation. And once in a while, I will lay that out, and people are tend to be really receptive to that. But in my desire to teach everything all at once, I spent a lot of time teaching about trauma, teaching about, again, what I would call the fifth dimension, which is the field of energy, which really includes everything that's ever happened to you, everything that's ever happened to your ancestors, everything that's ever happened to the earth, an ability to access this field to
Hmm.
resolve contracted fragmentation within the nervous system, within the energy body, which allows for higher and higher levels of well-being, clarity, transparency, all these beautiful offshoots. So that's where I spent most of my time. And so again, most of the people have come to me because of this. And then what happens is if you stare at this field of energy long enough, uh, you just get better and better at seeing through it. And then more recently, I've spent a lot of time meeting people at a soul level or a more subtle level, meeting them as light. Um, if they are new to the earth, meeting them where they come from, rather than having my relational work confined primarily to the fifth dimension, this sort of very human, earthly field. It now traverses the whole cosmic reality, which is extraordinary for so many reasons. And this is the thing that I'm most excited about right now because it's my cutting edge. But what it does mean is that I've gone from being really fluent in teaching something to opening up to a system of life, or the cosmic reality, which is so much bigger and has such a sophisticated rule set and has so much potential. I'm kind of like a beginner again, which is wonderful, which is wonderful.
Right.
So again, I try every few months, like, okay, I'm going to teach about whatever it is, liberation or traditional path to enlightenment. And then, I do that. And then I just get so into the people that are coming with me and what they're bringing and what they're really alive for. And so much of that now is at a soul or a cosmic level.
Yeah, it's very cool how that kind of thing just organically unfolds for us because I feel like all of us, who again take this calling, start by, teaching the teachings that we were taught. So
Yeah.
all the books, all the courses, all of the programs. And then once we become very experiential with people, it's like this play field, right? It's like this
Yeah.
energetic play field. And all of this, Spirit calls it for me the big picture all of the time. This big, you know, other world comes into play. And it's like we come in there and that creative flow happens in the way that it needs to, especially for the people who are like drawn to you, right? Who feel that resonance with you.
Yeah. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, it gets me excited just hearing all your words. It's such a wonderful thing
Yes.
for my vocation and my service to others and my curiosity just to
Right.
take me on this wonderful journey that
Yes. Yes.
extends beyond like what was primary or essential for me, or what I should say, on what I spent the most time focusing on.
Yeah,
So I agree
absolutely.
completely. When I started, I taught my path. I
Right.
taught what was really essential for me. And then what I realized is there's so much diversity. it's really not fair as as a teacher to say you're going to have this experience and then you're going to do this and then you're going to do this and then you're going
Right.
to do this. Yeah, that's what happened to me.
Right.
But then you meet people and you go, they don't have that sequence. How am I going to teach something that's broader than that? And like,
Right.
I care so much. Like, I have to change. I just
Yes.
can't not evolve to respond to people. And the thing that gives me the most joy, I mean, in non-duality, there's such an emphasis on like, we're really here to try to figure out one thing.
Right.
Like, if we could get all the people to just figure out the one answer, all have the same answer,
Right.
and there's a beauty and truth to that. And, I support that in its own way. But I just can't do that because what happens is what's coming at me is so much diversity.
Yes.
And I have to respond to that. It's a love of mine to respond to that and go, wow, like look at where we're all coming from and where we're all going. And how do I meet you where you're going rather
Right.
than tell you you should be going over here?
Yeah.
If you go there, if I support you to go wherever you're going, you will go even further than that. That's not a problem. We don't have to worry about that. We
Right.
don't have to
Right.
worry that somehow that's a distraction and you really should be going over here. Whatever it is that you're interested in, if your soul is burning, let's go there. If you have childhood trauma that's really showing up, let's do that. If you're really curious about awareness or meditation or anything else, absolutely. Let's meet you there. And over time, just like you're describing for us as practitioners, their world will expand too. We're
Right.
taking them on that same journey, except
Yes.
joy for me is making that like bespoke or making that unique to the person who is coming to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that the language that you use. So when you talked about the nervous system being like an internet, you know, is it was for quite some time, Spirit was giving me information and they would refer to everybody as coming online.
Yeah.
They would say more and more souls would be coming online. And I didn't understand, they don't always give me all of the answers at once. They usually give it to me in little bits and pieces so I can explore it and grow through it myself. But it's interesting as you were talking about that because I feel like, the idea of our nervous systems and getting to fully understand this and how our nervous systems change on this planet through experience and are changing at such a rapid pace that it has never ever happened before. Like you said, it's such an exciting time to be here because we have so many resources. We have
Yeah.
when we talk about in my field of the the dark with the agenda and then the light countering that, I feel like the technology is a big gift to us. I feel like it can be used as a weapon, but it also can be used as a gift, and part of that is like that self discovery and also how our nervous systems are changing, right? And do you notice that with your, I mean, you would notice that yourself. And I feel like when you went through that whole trauma of the raw and doing all that and, detoxing and all of that, you got to understand a nervous system firsthand.
Well, that was like um I feel just so alive and excited to be talking about this. That was really the beginning. Like the next 10 years after that, like I couldn't quantify the amount of change and the intensity of change that I experienced. Um, wouldn't know how to reference it. Continuous
Right.
intensity and
Right.
transformation, like as much as I could possibly take. Can't imagine that over the last, whatever it is now, 14 years, I could have experienced faster and more intense transformation. I physiologically wouldn't have been able to handle it. I
Right.
don't
You would have
like
combusted.
maximum level.
Right.
Um, but that doesn't stop. Like
Right.
the great part for me, the great confusion or the great problem to solve in spirituality is like, when do I get to the end of this?
Right.
And if we want it, there is a sort of end. There is a kind of a transcendent experience, which sort of marks the end. But that doesn't stop the
Right.
evolution or transformation of the body or any of the other forms or structures within consciousness. Those are going to evolve in me forever. So I have
Right.
this really wonderful experience now where I feel deeply at rest. I feel done in a certain way, in a way that allows me to be never done and completely unfinished, and to be in process forever, and to
Right.
be not like, when do I get to the point where like I can rest?
Yeah.
Because
You're not outcome dependent. You're not
I'm
like,
not outcome dependent anymore.
yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
So your question was, what I really wanted to hone in on is like, things are changing, and the resources that are available, the internet, the nervous system. I was really excited about what I was bringing, and it was essentially what I'd been taught, essentially what Thomas Hubel taught me. I ended up taking a program as a somatic therapist. But the first 4 years of my development were kind of trying to catch up to what I saw him do. Like, I saw this man be with people, be with me in a way that I couldn't understand how it was possible. Like, how are you feeling me? How do you know me? Like, you're just looking at me for the first time. How's it possible that you can
right.
feel with me or know what happened in my family?
Hmm.
And I was like, I have to be able to do that. So I really spent the first 4 years of my development focused on that. That was the kind of technology that I was trying to perfect or master. And again, I will never master it. I will always be growing. But what I'm realizing now is like, I'm sure your listeners, most of them will feel comfortable hearing me say this. I barely feel comfortable saying it, is the universe is streaming technology into the world right now at a rate that boggles my mind. Like, when we think about the internet and people being plugged in, most of the way I would talk about it and even conceptualize it when I was teaching as an earth-centric process. So basically the story is there's 8 billion people, their sort of souls are landing here. We're working through stuff, and the earth is going through a transformation. But now I would say, no, 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 it's not that the earth is going through a transformation. The cosmos, the universe, a much bigger playing field is going through a change. And the amount of impact that we are experiencing on earth from what exists beyond the earth is extraordinary. And as a very earthly spiritual person, I'm having to rapidly update my models and technology and understanding as fast as I possibly can. So, like,
Right.
if you were working in computers right now and you see AI coming, you go, I gotta rapidly
Right.
evolve my
Upgrade my
understanding of how to.
skills. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat.
Right.
Like, the intensity of what is happening now on this planet is the most interesting thing to me, and what I'm really most interested in being of service to.
Right. And it's such a balance though. Like, do you find even because I find, in supporting my own, clients, it's, I feel that need to go back to, the old school teachings, like what you're saying, which was like your, the building of your foundation.
Yeah,
But you also, that feels like it stops you. It's interesting. So my
yeah,
husband and I, we've been married for 23 years, and he was on the spiritual path way before I ever was, and so I feel like he's always had a bit of a. And so there'll be times where I'm very much a very, it's interesting because I always say if I hadn't become a psychic or a medium or the healer and doing the work, I probably would be dead somewhere, because all of that stuff allows me to get out of my head, get out of my thinking brain, get out of my type A personality. But he will, oftentimes when I'm like, struggling with something or like, really having a rough time, he like brings in the old school teachings for me, right? Again, to
yeah.
try and ground me, balance me. But I feel like there's like resistance there sometimes, because it's like we have one foot in the world that is this like awakening world that is like shifting and changing at a colossal rate. But then there's also like that other part of us that is like, oh, but remember, we still need to chop wood and carry water.
Well, and again, I'm loving that we're talking about this. You just keep naming things that are particularly important and interesting to me. Um, so within the world that I grew up in, I was very grateful that both the teachers that I named really suggested some form of integral practice. Like, you can't just meditate, you can't just do therapy. You really need to take an integrated approach. And so I've done a lot of chopping wood and carrying water physically. And I kind of got quite used to it, and I found that it was particularly helpful to my spiritual process.
Right.
Um, so I've been really grateful for that, and it really informs what I do now. Is like the greatest challenge that I see in spirituality is its lack of integration. I don't think, no matter how powerful your teaching is, I don't think it solves problems in other dimensions in a way that means you don't have to participate in them. So
Right.
we're moving into a world, we're moving into a civilization that, as I count it, is going to cross seven dimensions of consciousness. I could lay that out for you, but like it stretches a huge span of consciousness, and each dimension has its own mechanics that you
Right.
have to know and you have to participate in. And I just don't think it's possible to say, I'm going to take my whatever light-based reality and be successful on Earth by itself. You
Right.
need the light-based reality or the love-based reality or the spacious awareness or whatever it is that you're bringing in. You need that,
Hmm.
but they all fit together like a Swiss watch. Like they
Right.
all come together. It's not that one is going to overtake all of them. They're going to live as a spectrum. So over time, like am absolutely broadening my toolbox. And there are times, like you're saying, where when I'm working with people, happened yesterday, where like I was like I was struggling to switch lanes, and I had to like really be intentional to say, actually, I need to meet this person here
Right. Try and take them there. Yeah.
rather than do something else, which is never really happens. I mean, it happened yesterday. So it's definitely a challenge as you integrate things.
Hmm.
It takes a lot of capacity to see a world that has so many moving pieces that fit together. That is a
Right.
process. Whatever
Right.
whatever you're integrating, whether it's your own life history or nervous system, or as I'm describing the dimensions of consciousness, it is a process to integrate things, and it needs to
Right.
be supported. It needs to be
Mhm.
supported.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
this is where if you ask like who am I attracting or like what am I trying to attract, is
Hmm.
people that want to work in a multidimensional way, that get
Right.
I need to do work in many different dimensions of my life
Hmm.
and find that interesting and find that there's a tremendous beauty in feeling all of the dimensions of life come together.
Right.
And that's what we get to be as human beings. I
Yep.
don't know, I don't know what the future holds, and I can't tell you what challenges will be eliminated, but I can tell you that like simultaneously experiencing many dimensions of reality or many experiences of self makes life very, very rich and satisfying. And I can't promise ease in what happens there, but I can promise fascination. That part's guaranteed to happen.
Right. Absolutely. And do you feel like there's also, the people that are coming, that are coming online, there is like, there's the beginning place. Again, the spirit's always saying to me, there's no beginning and no end. So keep that in mind when I'm using these human words. But there is that, like, the beginning of the journey where there is like the death and the destruction and all of the pain and the suffering and however that plays out for you. And then there is like, this the 5D world that, everybody that in the spiritual world talks about, that this is where we're going, the new earth, all of, all of these words that we use. But I feel like right now particularly there's a massive amount of souls that are stuck in that middle. We're in that middle space, right? Where that's, again, it's there's no spiritual bypassing with it. We have to go through all of the places and portals and experiences to get from here to there. But again, that the mind is that, we're not, that's not the end of it. Once we get to that point, now we're looping around into another, right?
What I would just building on what you're saying, in my experience, it's not that we're trapped. Like when we talk about dimensions, if you don't experience this, it sounds like, getting on an airplane and going somewhere else.
Right.
It's a transformation of your body experience. So if I were to tell somebody, how do you get from being whatever it is, the reality you have now, to living in the fifth dimension?
Hmm.
The way I would describe it is that your nervous system, your energy body, is going to rapidly come to life, and that flow of energy is going to participate. It's going to become part of the fifth dimension.
Right.
So all the stuff you're going through is actually the material that you're going to use to plug into consciousness.
Right.
It's not like there's this, again, it's not like there's this stuff that's in the way.
Yeah.
What you are experiencing is the raw material that's going to plug you in.
Right.
Because the dimension of the life that we have lived in, from my perspective, is dominated by frozen energy, which creates solidity, which makes consciousness feel solid or dense,
Hmm.
and obscures higher consciousness. The fifth dimension is a field of living energy. So the
Right.
process essentially is transforming frozen energy
Right.
into living, flowing, integrated, participating energy.
Right.
So, like, if you are feeling your body and there is negativity, you're on your way. The question is, what do I do with that? Like,
Right.
it's okay, I've got all this stuff. Like, what do I actually do with that energy? And
Hmm.
again, like, this has been the foundation of what I teach. Like, there's really efficient ways to move this energy. The most efficient way is to share it with someone who is willing to receive it.
Right.
That's to share it with another nervous system that can actually take it. That's the fastest way, in my opinion, other
Right.
than sometimes people have, particularly rapid spiritual awakenings. But even then, the fastest way is to participate in relationship, because the fifth dimension is essentially an interrelated field of energy. That's
Right.
what it is. So if you
Right.
want to go there, start using the physics of it. Just
Right.
start doing the thing that is actually it's going to be like,
Right.
whatever
And so
level
can
or
you,
with whatever content you are working with.
right, exactly. And so can you, just for our listeners, just in layman's terms, so if you're talking about that, going from here to there and you're talking about that frigid energy or that stuck energy or that, tell us how does that show up in your life? Like as an example,
Yeah.
if you're in that energy state right now, what would be happening to you? How would you be feeling?
Yeah.
What would be your experience?
Yeah. Again, I really love your questions in this conversation. Um, traditionally, traditionally, we don't feel it. The way that trauma works, the way that this mechanism obscures energy, that makes it frozen in the first place, is we have an overwhelming experience. Through some point in our life, often primarily in our developmental process through childhood, we have an overwhelming experience that we either can't handle by ourselves, and or we can't have shared or co-regulated or received by someone else. So in a child, I feel sad, it's too much for me. There's no one to see me and comfort me and offer me comfort. Therefore, I close down. I use my energy to freeze that part of myself. I stop it from moving. When it stops moving, it becomes frozen. I don't feel it anymore, and I leave my body. So most of us, I say like, oh, there's all this energy, and people would say, I don't feel it. We'd
Hmm.
say, well, we have to learn how to look in the body, and we have to learn how to look in a particular way. You could just meditate on the body. You go to a Vipassana retreat and they'll just say, just sit there endlessly until it comes up. And traditionally, you absolutely could do that. Um, but where we're going to notice it on our own, it's usually going to be reflected in our thoughts and in our thinking. This is like a bookmark. Our thoughts aren't like some separate system from the rest of our energy body, our nervous system. All of our thoughts are like advocates
Right.
uh, for the life experience that we have that are going to be stored in our nervous system. So when we're on our own, uh, you have an argument with your spouse or your wife, and then you're driving in the car, like, if only he, if only she, I've told them so many times, and you're just spinning over and over again.
Hmm.
This will tell you, your thoughts will tell you that there's energy in your body that you need to see. And much of it precedes whatever moment it is that you're having. Whatever
Right.
moment you're having with your spouse, your child, your neighbor, uh, your nervous system holds everything that's ever happened to you.
Right.
So
Yes.
even though, you had an argument about taking out the garbage, that's not actually what you might find in your body. In
Right.
fact,
It's the accumulation of it. That's yes.
yes,
Yeah.
this is what being triggered is. And this is why it's really so important that, like, I'm never going to resolve the thing about the recycling with my wife. Like, I can have that argument 100 times, but it's
Right.
never going to touch me in the place that I need to be touched.
Right.
So there is a skill in learning to follow your thoughts into your body. So when I say I feel so angry, or when I say you never do what I ask you to do, or when I say, no one will ever like me, like, what's happening in my body? And I learn to recognize, like, when did this begin in my life? Like, my body is a library of everything that's ever happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned to feel younger. I learned to feel my whole life history through my nervous system. And I meet the energy at the actual time that it existed, meaning I learn to process things where they actually are occurring rather than being triggered and projecting them into the present moment reality. And this is a
Right.
skill that we can learn relationally. If you look again, I said traditionally it's reflected in our thoughts, but as changes in consciousness occur, it's increasingly reflected emotionally. Like when I look at the political landscape, like it's not people just having intellectual arguments about all the stuff that's going on out there.
Right.
Increasingly, people are, I don't know what to say,
It's
hot.
very emotional. It's
It's
very emotional.
very emotional. It's
Yes.
very charged. It's not like
Yes.
we're having a discussion about the
Right.
Supreme Court, right?
Right.
Like it's not an intellectual discussion. It's rapidly turning into a body experience.
Absolutely.
The problem is that in our civilization, we don't have the skills to help people actually recognize what's happening for them in their body and where it comes from. And
Right.
so that we have a lot of very hot conversations, and I don't see them as being particularly transformative, productive. There's a lot
Right.
of pressure. Just like anyone who's getting triggered, there's a lot of pressure to develop skills, how to be with yourself.
Right.
So this is,
Absolutely.
again, I've said I've spent most of my time focusing on developing these skills because I think they're really, really important. They're really,
Absolutely.
really, really important. And life is pushing us to require us to have those skills. Like it's getting harder and harder to not have those skills.
Absolutely. And so that's something that you work with clients then, because you touched briefly on it, and we definitely will have to have you back because there's so much that we can explore together. But the idea of just sharing that part with you with in community or with a person, being able to, and is that enough for us to begin healing, like just bringing the light to the stuff that we're carrying, the emotions, the trauma, the drama, is that enough to like kind of start that healing for most people?
Yeah, and my intention is to create the most integrated, broad spectrum of practicing. It's one facet. It's one facet. Is it enough? For many people, it's enough to get them started. It's a
Right.
huge world to learn about that you can dive into. Some people don't even start there. Some people are like, yeah, maybe I have to do that, but I'm really interested in meditation right now. And I
Right.
would go, great, let's learn about meditation. If that's the facet that you want to learn about,
Yeah.
the thing is that the when you get into this, it's going to require your skills and your perspective to broaden
Right.
to really master what we're talking about. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to ask you, it's going to push you to
Mm-hmm.
broaden and broaden your understanding of consciousness. So my job is really to go, oh, there's somebody out there that needs this skill set or resonates with this
Right.
or wants to know about their soul or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And let's ground you in that. And then let's just broaden your perspective over time,
Right.
over time, and you get a broader and broader skill set that integrates all of the facets of consciousness.
Right.
So I don't know if it's enough for people to get started. You will know. You will know because you say, wow, I really want to do that, or wow, I really need to do that, or
Right.
that's a risk for me and I really want to take it. Or
Mm-hmm.
you'll say, actually, I want to do this other thing. And my job is to say, absolutely, let's do that other thing. But here's how that other thing fits into the big picture. Like that other thing, or this thing, or the fifth dimension, or relational practice, or self-regulation, or recognizing what's happening in your body. This fits into this big landscape.
Right, right,
Here you are now, and that's great. And over time, here we are expanding and expanding and expanding.
right. And so you're literally meeting them wherever they are, wherever they happen to be when they come to you at that point. And then it's also not a linear, like, okay, now we go this way. Sometimes it's like this, right? Sometimes we're just going in that spin. Yeah.
And to be really clear, it's not like, oh, I finished with the fifth dimension and now I'm in the sixth dimension.
Right.
Now I'm doing you consciousness, you don't travel from place to place. You expand into a fuller spectrum. You will always be using the skills that you learn at the beginning,
Right.
and wherever your beginning is, they will
Yeah.
just be built upon. They will just get
Right.
bigger and more sophisticated and have
Right.
more parts that fit together. So
Yes.
again, just as you're emphasizing, it's not so important where you start.
Right.
What's important is that you do the work there and that you grow and that it
Hmm.
keeps evolving and that you're motivated to do it. I mean, you can have somebody tell you you need to do this, but the best work is done in the place that you really need and want to be working. That's
Yeah,
that's where you should be.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I also feel like it's important to acknowledge that it's not a one size fits all or one size, equation for when we talk about our healing or the healing process. Which is interesting because that's when that duality always comes in, right? Because if we go back into the old school teachings, it's like it's oneness, we're all one, it's just consciousness, it's all.
Mhm.
But there, I feel like there are these aspects that are awakening individually in us that we're like, well, but I don't feel like the oneness right now. I don't feel like all of it. I feel like, and that needs to be acknowledged. I feel like that's part of the grand awakening that's happening.
Yeah, and if somebody was like, what's the best way to get towards the most universal supreme oneness? I would say you need to integrate as many of the parts, the distinct, unique parts within that oneness, and assemble them into the largest, most integrated body of consciousness that you can. If you do that, the oneness is going to be really obvious to you. I'm not a big believer in the let's wait here and see if we can recognize oneness as a strategy rather than meeting your life as it actually is, which is your life is a focus on parts. Your
Right.
life is always a focus on parts. As non-dual or as unified or clear as you can be, you're still going to be spending your life focusing on parts. That's
Right.
what we do. So that's what we should be spending our time doing in our spiritual practice. I don't think it's like if there was a sign in the distance that you couldn't read, there are two approaches. One is I could stand here and hope that if I keep looking at it, I'll see it. The
Right.
other is I just start walking towards the sign, and every
Right.
step I take, it gets clear.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's as a teacher, my job is to say those little steps are absolutely on the way to the
Mm-hmm.
universal reality that you're seeking, and it's really okay for them to matter to you. It's
Mm-hmm.
really okay for you to care about your kids or your soul or like or be afraid of something or talk about your childhood. Those are not divergent from
Right.
oneness.
Right.
Oh, here's the map. And like, how can I encourage you to take on all those parts as efficiently as possible? We'll get there. We'll get
Right.
there. It's all on the way. It's all on.
Right. Yeah. That's beautiful. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, so I will make sure that I put all of the contact information for you. We'll share out your stuff so everybody knows how to get in touch with you. Are you doing any events? Do you have any upcoming events that you want to talk about or any classes in particular?
Yeah. I do a lot of different stuff. I do free events. Again, I teach meditation. I teach the kind of relational practice sort of associated with the fifth dimension and all the feelings and content of our lives. Um, One of my main sort of things is I have people come together and learn the practice that I teach and a lot of what we've been speaking about trauma and relationship. And I run those programs every couple months or so. So if that's interesting to you, then absolutely. And I'm always expanding what I do. Again, I teach regularly a giant map of consciousness retreat that I run a couple times a year online now. Um, what else? I am now going to figure out how to create a curriculum around light. souls, process of incarnation, and the broader cosmic reality. Um, and the
Sounds
most important
exciting
thing,
for sure.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
super fun and exciting. And the most important thing is like when you just do something with me and find out if you like it. And
Yeah.
then if you're in, like, my job is like, here are all the other things you could do. And
Right.
so again, it doesn't matter where you start, whether it's sitting with me in silence in meditation or
Yeah.
wanting to learn this over time, you just world will get bigger.
Yeah. And it's just
And
finding that starting point for you, where whatever that may look like, however that plays out for you. That's
yeah, and the other thing I should just add, just to complete that, is on the other side of introductory experiences is a kind of community of practitioners who have increasing experience, who do the work together.
well, it's beautiful.
That's the developing body of consciousness that yeah, I plug you into.
That's very cool. The vision that Spirit just gave me, that of like is beautiful. I'm excited to see what comes with that from you.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure. I feel much lighter from our conversation, so that's always a good sign when there's that expansion in consciousness that naturally happens. So we definitely will have you back because I feel like there's so many other things we can explore together, and I'm sure our listeners will feel the same.
I'd love that. It's really fun to talk to you.
Beautiful. Thanks everybody for listening, and Blaise will definitely see you again. Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Collective Soulversations podcast. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen, and we hope that you found our chat both inspiring and thought provoking. Your support means everything to us, and we're excited to keep this journey going with you. So make sure that you subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, we'd love for you to leave us a review and share your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback helps us grow and connect with more wonderful listeners like you. Until next time, stay curious and keep those soulversations flowing.